Hey guys, let's talk about the broken business of e-commerce and why your startup is not the next Casper. Here's why. Here's the thing. Amazon won e-commerce. My background is e-commerce. I've built and sold 3 companies, all of them in the e-commerce space. One of them specifically on Amazon, the other a podcast about selling on Amazon. We scaled the business up. It was a successful exit, we'll say that. And it allowed me to get into angel investing. But my background building and selling and scaling on Amazon has taught me a few things, and that is Amazon is absolutely the dominant player in the space. They're scaling incredibly quickly. They're killing e-commerce. They're cutting out individual brands, and they will be probably the ubiquitous future for most commerce, especially CPG stuff, grocery stuff, healthcare stuff, etc. in the future. If you're interested in that, check out some of our other videos where we break down Amazon's business a little bit further. But let's talk about e-commerce. As an angel investor, as someone who's been in the space, e-commerce companies, for the most part, are not fundable. There's just too many problems with the businesses. If you're trying to build something, there's the capital cost that goes into it. There's the fact that you don't have a lot of moat or distance from other people. There's not a lot of network effects, etc. There's 2 categories of e-commerce companies which are pretty fundable. There's marketplaces, which we've seen in the past and have been incredibly successful. Amazon, Etsy, eBay, those have been the biggest winners when it comes to e-commerce. We're not going to talk about marketplaces. And then there's brands. So not including the B2B or the SaaS side of things where you're providing services for companies, but the brands, the companies as well. There's 4 categories of different e-commerce brands or different e-commerce models, so to speak. There's direct to consumer, there's subscription companies, there's delivery companies, and then there's experiential commerce. We'll jump into each of these. First, let's talk direct to consumer. So in a direct to consumer model, you're cutting out the middlemen, you're producing everything, and you're getting the product to customers. No middlemen, no cuts, no margins, none of this. Things are cheap, fast, easy, and high quality. Some examples of this would be Casper, Harry's, etc., where you're ordering product, the company has innovated, they found a reason why this market is incredibly inefficient, and they're getting you better product at a better price. This worked for Casper, the $700 million plus mattress company, because buying a mattress, A, it's super inefficient. You got to go to a mattress store. B, there's like 50 different mattresses. So how do you know what you want? And C, it's a terrible experience because you buy it, but there's that guy in the showroom who's like, here, try this one. Try this one. No, this one might be right for you. And because there's the showroom, things are so much more expensive. There's a lot of middlemen in the middle. And that means you're getting a low quality mattress at a pretty expensive premium price that's pretty inefficient that you somehow need to then get to your home. Casper cut all of that out by saying, okay, we're going to manufacture this. We'll make it cheap. We'll make it awesome. We'll ship it to you. There's only 2 models. There's only 1 model. And it's incredibly comfy. Oh, and by the way, there's a 90-night free guarantee. So try it out. See if you like it. See if the sex is incredible. If it is, keep the mattress. Casper succeeded incredibly well. Most direct-to-consumer companies don't succeed because it's very hard to be 5 to 10x better. You can't be 10% cheaper, 20% cheaper, because that's not 5 to 10x better. That is better, but it's not enough better to get enough people to change. If you made an iPhone that was essentially an iPhone, but it was 5% cheaper, how many people would switch? Not a lot. That's not very defensible. Now, things to look for in a good direct-to-consumer brand. You want high gross margins, typically products that are going to be a little bit bigger or medium size, so big ticket items, things where you can spend a fair bit of money on the on the CAC, on customer acquisition costs. So if you're selling a mattress, but you're selling that for a pretty solid amount of money, you can spend a decent amount of money on advertising, etc., to get customers in, and you're still going to be able to be profitable. You want to look for a small number of entrenched players. So in a market where there's not a lot of players, that's typically going to have more monopolistic type pricing, where they haven't had to innovate very long and they're making way too much money. These are going to let you probably undercut the market a bit while offering a better product and being successful. There needs to be high barriers to entry. So if this is something that's relatively easy to get into, it's never going to work. My background is e-commerce. I white labeled a lot of products in the past. There's not a lot of a moat or defensibility there. So those type of companies have a lot of trouble with keeping pricing power, with keeping margins, when everyone and their grandmother is able to come in and create a new business. You want products with some type of repeat purchasing behavior. Obviously, this isn't necessarily true for Casper. You might be buying a new mattress every 5 or 10 years. There's not going to be a lot of repeats. But if you can have a company that's selling something direct to consumers that has a repeat, or some type of something that you can continue to sell them, that makes things much easier because your LTV goes up, your business becomes much more successful, and the second sale is always easier than the first sale. And then you want a relatively small product line. There's a reason why before recently Apple didn't have that many products. It's if you walk into a shoe store and there's 100 different pairs of shoes, it's really freaking hard to find out which pair of shoes you want. So you probably don't end up buying any of them. That's why Casper only offers 1 or 2 mattresses. You want A or you want B. You choose one and it's done. That's great for the company, and it's typically great for the consumer as well. And because you can focus on making the best possible product, you don't have to have all these different SKUs. So that would be what you look for in direct-to-consumer. Let's talk subscription companies now. Before we do, though, if you haven't connected on social media, make sure you reach out and say, hey, I'm Matt Ward IO on Twitter. You can hit me up there, and I would love to hear from you guys. And leave some comments in the show, etc. here on YouTube if you like this, and we'll make sure that we got more great stuff coming out. Let's talk to subscription box companies. So typically this has been something like... there's been a lot of subscription companies. There's been Trunk Club, Birchbox, Dollar Shave Club, Blue Apron, etc. And these companies have been pretty successful in the past because if you're able to take an e-commerce product but have it be recurring, I need shaving cream every single month, I need a shaver every month, I need new socks every year because somehow I lose my socks. Whatever it is, then these type of business models can make a lot of money, and you're selling something once, but you have recurring revenue coming in, which makes it a lot like SaaS, but it means that you don't have to necessarily play in those type of spaces. So that's why these have become so popular when it comes to the investor space, the startup space, etc. The big problem, though, is the unit economics typically get worse. If you're selling a subscription box of awesome socks or of cool wines or of wines isn't a good example. Anything that's not consumable, I only need so many t-shirts, and then I'm just going to be sick of getting more t-shirts in the mail. So if you have a model where the consumer can not want more, basically there can be a limit to the amount of these products they can get, you're going to have an obvious churn point. The other problem is, let's say you're selling a wine subscription box. There's only so many people in the world that want wine. So let's say you're successful and you've got everything financially modeled out. Okay, look, it cost us $20 to acquire a customer, and over the course of the first year and a half, we make $25, which is when customers churn. Well, we're making $5. You know what? That's pretty good. It could definitely be worse. That's a 20% margin. But the early customers that you get will always be the easier ones. If it's a model like this where there's not a specific reason to tell your friends or family about it, there's not going to be improving unit economics. Instead, it's going to get worse because you initially got all the wine people already. Now suddenly you have to convince people who don't like wine to start drinking wine. Otherwise, you can't sell more wine. And if you can't sell more wine, your business is crapped on. And this is pretty much what's happened to Blue Apron. They've tanked since going public because they realized everyone that wanted to buy a meal kit pretty much already had bought a meal kit by the time they went public. Things to look for in a subscription business. You want products with repeat purchasing behavior. Ideally something that's consumable. If it's food, if it's a drink, if it's deodorant, something that people have to continuously keep using, because then they're not going to want to cancel. They're not going to churn. The business model just grows and grows and grows. If you're able to have negative churn where you're selling more to existing customers, then that's even better. Let's see, some other stuff. You want categories that don't have a lot of innovation or startups. You don't want to be competing with a lot of young guns that are willing to try new things out and experiment. You don't want to compete with all of these subscription box companies. You want to be dealing with existing players who really aren't doing that much innovative. There's a reason why Gillette bought Dollar Shave Club, and that's because there was an innovative brand that had a really strong team that had really good systems in terms of getting product direct to consumers in a subscription box type manner. And Gillette wasn't very good at that. They weren't able to innovate because they already had the existing business. Looking for industries that don't have that innovation already can be pretty good. Product lines, you want barriers to entry that are pretty large. You don't want a lot of competitors coming in because otherwise suddenly you have the situation where everyone and their grandmother is competing with you, and you need upsells and possible remonetization strategies because you do have an e-commerce business. It's relatively expensive, and you've got to be able to find ways to boost your margin and LTV, your lifetime value of a customer, whenever you can. If you haven't, follow me on Twitter, MattWardIO. I've also got a website, mattward.io, and if you're interested in this type of stuff, fringe.fm. You can find exponential tech talks with some of the world leaders in all of the most exciting fields at fringe.fm. Number 4, the fourth type of fundable business, delivery companies. You don't fund delivery companies. I've seen a lot of funding go into different e-commerce type delivery companies, and I think in general they may have been successful when the initial funding went in, but this is pretty much a terrible business model now, because when it comes to delivery, when it comes to shipping, when it comes to transportation, I care about 2 things: fast, cheap. Well, fast makes things expensive and cheap kills the business. So if Uber Eats comes in and is able to offer better pricing than one you have, well, perfect, I'll go with Uber Eats. And then if Instacart comes in and drops their price even more, awesome, I'll go with Instacart. And if homeless guy ABC is able to drop off things cheaper, then I'll go with him. I care about speed and I care about low cost. And that's not something that has any type of moat remotely. Delivery companies almost always go to zero. Experiential commerce. Let's reinvent what shopping is. This is the big area. This is the one that's the most untapped and has the most potential for growth. There's two types of experiential commerce. There's local experiential commerce and there's virtual experiential commerce. In local, we see companies like Warby, Parker, and Amazon opening up retail stores, which is funny. These are e-commerce companies that are doing incredibly well and they're opening up retail stores. The reason is they found that by having these retail stores, they can interact better with customers, they can understand them better, and they can, most importantly, sell more product. So today you go to Best Buy, you try out this phone. Oh, wow, I like this one. I bet you it's cheaper on Amazon. Oh, wow, it's 11% cheaper. Let me order this directly from Best Buy using Best Buy's Wi-Fi, and I'll order it to just be shipped to my house because it's cheaper. That's what's happening right now to retail. Retail is too expensive because they have massive footprints, which means all of these extra costs which get weighed into the price. What you can do with interesting e-commerce companies is you can have local locations, but you want to reduce the footprint and have larger online stock, which is what we've been seeing with a lot of companies now. Retailers, what we've also found, are willing to pay a heck of a lot of money to save themselves. So this isn't the perfect example, but GM bought Cruise for $1 billion because they knew they have to win AI, they have to win autonomous driving, or they will die. And we see similar things happening in the retail space. So if you have an innovative retail company, innovative retail startup that will help these companies succeed in some way, shape, or form, they have lots of money and are willing to blow that money to save themselves, because even Toys R Us went bankrupt, although that had to do with bad private equity. So it's not quite to the point. When considering local commerce type strategies, there's a few things to consider. Products with a large cost to size ratio are very important. So if you're selling things that are large but aren't expensive, it's going to take up a lot of space, which is going to make a major amount of money that goes into your rent, which is going to kill your margins. What you need to do instead is sell an Apple Watch, sell an iPhone, etc., which is tiny but costs a fortune, because then you're able to have a ton of value in a small location. You're able to make money without having to boost or have high rents, etc., which would increase the price of the products. So high cost to weight ratio. Categories with high gross margins, again, very important, because you want to be able to make solid money on what you're selling with the medium to big ticket items. These allow you to have a greater cost of acquisition, i.e. what it costs you to get a customer to buy your product. You want categories with few innovative competitors. This is pretty much consistent, because why would you want to compete with innovators? And you want a product line where the returns are very high without initially trying the product. So the reason why this is important is if you're selling something where people try it on and they're much more likely to keep it, like for instance shoes. Zappos probably loses a fortune on shipping shoes. Now they make enough money where it doesn't matter, but now let's imagine shoes were something where instead of selling them for $50, you were selling them for significantly more money and it took up less space. Now that's interesting, because if you're able to have less returns, you suddenly have an advantage over e-commerce companies, because you have this location. Even though you might be shipping something to them remotely, they're able to try it on. Less returns means more money, more margins for you. Hit that subscribe button if you guys like this. I'm Matt Ward. I'm your host. This is angel investing, startups, entrepreneurship, e-commerce. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, hit the subscribe button on this channel and you'll get more great videos just like this one. Some stuff that I find interesting. I think big box can do a much better job when it comes to local commerce. What they've typically done in the past, which has killed them, look at Groupon, look at all of these other types of business models. It's essentially been, hey, coupons. We're going to just cut our prices and don't worry. Even though typically they'll raise the price and then give you a discount. But discounting is not a great way to sell your products. We've seen from Mac and from Apple that by not discounting, they've been very successful and have a very high quality brand they can sell for super expensive margins, where they're pretty much just scraping you over the coals. But a lot of brands can't do that. And the reason is they do a lot of discounting. Well, what they could do, instead of just trying to send you coupons, etc., to get you to come into the store, what if Kroger offered a cooking class? So every Thursday night, they had a cooking class for moms and dads to come in and learn how to cook awesome food. Well, they're going to come into the store and maybe they're going to buy groceries too, especially the stuff you teach them to cook. Maybe Petco, they have a doggy daycare, or better yet, they have doggy training classes. You come in, you get your puppy trained, and oh, look at all these cute toys. I got to buy one for Fido, right? There's a lot of interesting stuff that can happen, and the death by a million deals is definitely not the way you want to go. I think a really interesting area of e-commerce is going to be the virtual real world and virtual world commerce. So virtual real world. You've seen a lot of AR stuff now. Maybe Pokemon Go. People are walking around on their phone trying to catch them all. And that's kind of the first rendition of AR, other than Google Glass, which was terrible. But AR and VR for buying goods is going to be pretty interesting. So people are already doing it now with their phones. They can see how this sofa looks in my living room. I can see the bed. I can see what I would look like with this shirt on, etc. That's already pretty promising. And Amazon's pushing very hard on this because they've got all the products. If they can make you see the stuff and increase conversion rates, they're going to win anyways. But there's a lot of companies that are working really hard on getting this AR augmentation for the shopping experience, because boosting that checkout rate is going to be massive amounts of money. Another company that's doing an interesting but different way is Brit & Co. So what Brit & Co does is they sell essentially hobby type experiences. So they might teach you how to paint, they might teach you how to sculpt, etc. They have all these classes which you can buy. And yet, in addition to the classes, you can buy the kit that goes with the class, or something that you wouldn't necessarily need but would be beneficial. I can buy the paintbrushes, I can buy all of these things. So they're winning with the content, but then also having the upsell on the e-commerce side of things with the product. That's a really interesting way going forward that not a lot of companies are doing, that creates incredible moats. It creates very loyal customers that love you and buy a ton of stuff. So Brit & Co, if you want to check them out, that's a great e-commerce model. And then the third and most interesting model of the virtual commerce is going to be actual virtual commerce. As we're living in a more AR and VR type world, maybe an augmented reality type situation. I want to have like cool outfits I can wear that you only see me if you have augmented reality. Or in virtual reality, maybe I want to have a Tesla at my house and I have a gardener that's designing all of these things, and I have really cool clothes, and I have an anti-gravity room, and all of these things that people are going to have to design in VR and then sell. Well, that's still e-commerce. Now, if you look at technology, typically technology is pushed along by one of two things: illegal or adult industry. I think virtual reality will get pushed very far along by the adult industry when it comes to porn and prostitution. If people are desperate for certain things, they're going to find ways to get those certain things. And those industries are always at the cutting edge because they have to try whatever they can to make money, succeed, and be ahead of everything else. So, prostitution will push along the actual services model in VR. So we need someone to build the platform for exchange of currency, etc., for different services. I could see that happening with what we talked about previously. Same thing with anything else. And as VR starts to become more ubiquitous and we start to have more experiences here, there's $2 billion that happen in commerce every year on Second Life. And Second Life, not that big, not that successful. If you look at something like the Oasis from Ready Player One, well, suddenly you're not looking at doubling the economy, you're looking at something even much bigger. And I think that we could be looking directions in that way. So the company that's able to build the platforms and systems for conducting commerce in VR will be very interesting. In Minecraft, people spend hundreds of dollars just trying to create things. I think we'd definitely be willing to buy things. We've seen the freemium model work very well. Look at like a Fortnite. People are willing to pay so much money for cool skins, etc. And then the last, which kind of comes in as well to e-commerce, is the 3D printing space. So while we have manufacturing, we're basically building everything in China. Trump's trying to tariff it all now and then importing it to the US, Europe, etc. What happens when we have 3D printers that are able to print out my iPhone on demand right here for me? We have people that are printing out guns, etc. It becomes interesting. What happens with the laws? What happens with ownership, property rights, IP, torrenting, etc. when suddenly we're able to print out products? And with printing out products, as that becomes more ubiquitous, also that will break down the world supply chain, because suddenly there's no point shipping something from A to B across the world when I can just print it out here. If you're interested in these type of implications, look at the Tech Talks and you can see 3D printing. I talk a bit more about some of the implications and where we're headed with 3D printing, timelines, projections, etc. You can find that on fringe.fm/YouTube or right here on the YouTube channel as well. Which, speaking of which, if you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit that subscribe button if this has been fun, if it's been interesting. With 3D printing, there's no money in the printers or in the hardware. This is just like printers. This is just like just about everything. The hardware is not that successful. It's the platforms. It's also the ink, etc., that goes into manufacturing, the what you need to make stuff type deal. So the designs and the inks, resins, etc., are where the money's going to be. What I would like to see as an angel investor is someone building that marketplace for different types of IP designs that can be directly 3D printed. Because if you're able to build the Amazon of 3D printed products, you're going to make a lot of money from people as 3D printing becomes a larger deal, which it hasn't really to date, because it's kind of a chicken and the egg problem. It's too expensive because there's not enough demand. As demand increases, costs go down and supply goes up, so that things become much more interesting. Anyways, this is e-commerce. This is what the future of e-commerce looks like. This is some of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I hope this has been valuable for you. I'm your host, Matt Ward. If you guys have liked this, subscribe to the podcast, fringe.fm. You can find us, fringe.fm, on all major podcasting apps. Just search Fringe FM. You can also find us here, fringe.fm/iTunes/Stitcher/Android. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. Just go for a search. I'm your host, Matt Ward. I'm an angel investor, a serial entrepreneur, futurist, startup advisor. I like working with technology and trying to make a better future. That's our goal with fringe.fm. Check us out if you find this interesting. And remember, hit that subscribe button now so that you do not miss a thing. Until next time, have an awesome day and kick some butt. Cheers, guys.